Hello, this is Dave O'Donnell from Yamanashi Gakuin University's International College of Liberal Arts, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Mike Blow. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you, Dave?
I'm wonderful. I'm wonderful. And you are our music professor, director of music. Is that correct?
I am indeed,
I
yes.
am
Yeah,
indeed. You are
absolutely.
indeed, rather. I said I am indeed. Sorry. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got into music and how you became a professor of music?
Sure. So basically, I've been playing music since I was about 13. So that's a long, long time. Um, I played guitar, electric guitar. In fact, actually, before that, I played recorder for about one term at school and hated it
Mm,
and tried everything I could to get out of the classes. and um, and eventually they realised I didn't really like the recorder,
mm,
and they let me leave, which was kind of interesting because then um, when I was 13, I started these guitar lessons at my school, and immediately I felt like, oh, I can do this. I can. I kind of understand. Somehow I understood the guitar, and um, and I remember the in my first lesson, the guitar teacher said, these are the chords to this particular song. I think it was a Bob Dylan song or something like
mm,
that. And he said it's also the same chords are in one of the songs that are in the charts at the moment, one of the pop songs in the
mm.
charts at the moment. And he told me what the song was. And I went home that night and I figured out how the chords went in that song.
Yeah.
I could hear it in my head already. And so kind of from then on I was hooked. It's a great feeling to be able to play and to be able to work out music. And so I joined bands and played guitar. I've also played bass. Um, I have played keyboards quite badly sometimes. And I can show you in here, I've got the washing behind me, but you can see I've got a few keyboards set up
Oh,
here.
nice, nice.
Um,
And how did you decide to go
right there.
from wonderful? How did you decide to go from a musician to a scholar of, would you say you're a musicologist or a, how do you define
No,
it?
not really a musicologist. So musicologists tend to look at the kind of history of music more
Okay.
as an academic, um, kind of coming at music from a humanities point of view, where they're writing papers and they're
Mm,
studying um, perhaps the output of a particular composer and things like that. Um, I am much more practical,
mm,
and I also actually studied engineering
mm,
while being in bands. I studied engineering, so I've always had that part of my interest and work as well has been partly on the kind of engineering side. So I've also done quite a lot of work with sound engineering, so recording music, mixing and mastering and that kind of thing. And that's one of the things I do at ICLA is in the music technology course, we look at how you might record your own music and also how you mix it and how you what's called mastering, which is how you make it sound better for then sort of upload to YouTube or whatever,
uh,
for release essentially.
and,
Um, so so that those two things, there's a strong technical component to music anyway,
mm,
and so those two things are kind of come together.
mm. And you say mastering, when we hear that such and such a classic from Bob Dylan or the Beatles is being remastered, what does that entail?
So basically, what you do is you take the mix of the song, so it's a finished mix.
Mhm,
It's got all the parts there. What mastering does is it usually does two things. It raises the volume of the track so that it's sort of to a contemporary volume that will come across well on the radio or in a release. Um, uh, and it also often will change uh, the EQ of the track slightly and make it feel punchy. And there are things you can do in mastering that will just affect particular uh, frequencies or even particular instruments. So you can give a track more bass or more sort of top end, so make it sound more airy. You can make the vocal stick out more, a bit less. So you can kind of it's not remixing it, but you can adapt it and make it sound kind of usually cleaner, louder, um, and more professional.
Mm. And you mentioned EQ. What does EQ stand for? I'm sorry.
Equalization, so actually bass and treble,
Oh, okay.
essentially. Yeah, yeah.
Eh, and how long have you been teaching music?
Well, actually, as a specific music professor, I suppose the job I had before I came to ICLA, I was teaching in Leicester in the UK, and I was actually teaching kind of music and some technical stuff, electronics and things like that. Um, and that was just started that I think 2016. But before that, I was teaching digital art,
Mhm.
so that involved sound, um, but also visuals and things like virtual reality and stuff like that. Um, and a lot of that obviously was done with code. And one of the workshops I do here is interactive art, where we look at how you code up um, interactive artworks essentially, or things that use the webcam, make to change sounds or to change images. Um, and then before that, I actually did a PhD in sound art.
Mhm.
Is again one of the courses that I run at ICLA, sound art, which is kind of interesting because um, it's somewhere between traditional music and traditional visual art. You
Mhm.
kind of mix the two, and you end up with the discipline of sound art.
I remember on one cold winter evening, I was walking through campus and I saw you and one of your students, quite surprisingly, with your ears up against a tubular sculpture. um, as you're,
That's right, the
yeah,
UFO.
yeah, the UFO. And was that the creation or performance of sound art? Was that an
That
example?
was indeed that was a submission for the sound art class. So basically, that student, um, I'd I tasked them. The assignment was to create a piece of sound art that was specifically created for a particular location.
Mm,
Um, and that's kind of interesting because then you get into the idea of site specificity, which is where a piece of art is made to exist in a particular location, and it doesn't really make much sense if you take it out of that location. It's kind of
mm,
tied to that location. And so what she did was she decided that she would like to make a piece for the UFO sculpture on the YGU campus. And what was interesting was that she used a special kind of speaker. So she made recordings from this a sculpture to begin with, and she made a composition from those. And
mm,
then she played it back using this special speaker that um, you place it on materials and it makes the materials vibrate, and that's how the sound gets louder. So you actually get quite a lot of little iPhone speakers that are like this. You put them on a table
mm,
and the sound resonates through the table and it gets louder.
mm,
And so she presented it by putting this little speaker onto the UFO sculpture.
mm,
And then we were listening to it by putting our ears against the sculpture and
mm,
hearing the sound come from the sculpture. So it was very much tied to its location because you were literally listening to the location
mm.
as you were listening to the work, if you see what I mean. So it was quite
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
So yeah, it was a good piece.
I was quite fascinated by that. We're almost out of time for our 10-minute conversation, but
Cool.
frequently I joke, I quip when I see you busily at work in your office that you may, in fact, be a mad scientist. You've often got soldering irons and machines and different motherboards, or I don't know what. Can you tell us, for the record, are you
Yeah.
a mad scientist?
Sometimes yes.
Yeah, sometimes you are. And final,
Yeah.
final question.
Sometimes I'm definitely mad scientist mode.
And final question. You told me at one point you might help me try to pick up the guitar again. I picked up the guitar when I was 10 years old, and rather than having a lifelong connection as you did, I put it down quickly after my sisters made fun of me for being tuneless and awful. Can you give me a lesson someday?
I'd be very happy to.
Okay, that's it. We're done with 10 minutes.